question I want to ask you is, why are you here? There are 5 options I'm giving you. The first one is you're just curious about the topic of organizational happiness. You might want to take some ideas back to your team. So you are already in a position where you want to implement something and you want a very practical to do. The third option is that you are ready to implement and you just want to know how. Fourth option is you want to know about the course that we're offering. It's a 5-week course starting in a couple of weeks, and that's why you're here. And there might be another reason why you're here. So in order to get a sense of why you're here, I'm going to just launch a poll. And please, are you seeing the poll pop up on your screen with these different options? Yes, so please start voting. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond. So far, ahead of the game is I'm just curious about the topic. Close second is I want to take some ideas back to my team. I'm ready to implement, just at 10%. I'll share the results with you as soon as everyone's done voting. So couple of people left to vote, going once, going twice. Okay, we've got 42 out of 45 votes. I'm going to end the poll and share results. Are you seeing the results here? Okay, so I'm curious about the topic. 25 of you responded that. I want to take ideas back to my team. 17 of you responded to that option. I'm ready to implement and just want to know how. 5 of you said that. 11 of you are interested in the course, the 5-week course that we're offering. And another reason, a couple of you are here for other reasons. So feel free in the chat box, if there's another reason that you're here, please feel free to just type that in so we get a chance to see that also. So for right now, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the Center for Executive Education at the University for Peace that's offering this webinar. The University for Peace was established by the United Nations back in 1980 in Costa Rica. It's a country without an army, committed to principles of sustainable development and peace. We're an international university, and part of our mission is to really give people like you, people who are change makers, the tools to be actors for a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. And part of it, you may have seen in the webinar invitation, we spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. It is a place where we need to know how to create the conditions for us all to flourish. That's a really important pillar of peace. And in fact, the United Nations has a UN Peace Day in March. So we're committed to this idea of being change makers and really fostering peace in all the environments that we influence. So welcome again. And so I'm delighted at this point to introduce LARS, my co-facilitator. LARS, there are a lot of people on the screen, so at some point you're going to have to wave and make yourself. Yeah, so LARS and I met a number of years ago in Costa Rica. LARS is from Denmark. LARS, over to you, but we've been collaborating for, I think, 7 or 8 years now, and on different topics, but really the focus has been around human flourishing, well-being, and how to bring it to different aspects of people's environment. So LARS, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Mohit, and thank you everybody for joining us for this snapshot. It's really a complex thing that we're going to put into 45 minutes, but I hope we'll be able to share and inspire most of you, and also meeting you again somewhere, might in the course or somewhere else. I want, just on that picture here, Mohit, I just wanted to say on that picture on the right side, this is one of the only, I think this is the only time that Mohit was taller than I. And it's a nice picture from the UPEACE campus in Costa Rica. It's a magical place. If you ever get a chance to go to the university in Costa Rica, go there. find an opportunity, connect with us, or go and look at what you can do there. But I wanted to, 1 year, last year, I would say, almost a little more than 1 year ago, we published this book, Organizational Happiness. And it was a little bit of a surprise, because very fast it became a #1 international bestseller in like 17 geographies. And it was really a surprise. Of course, it was a nice feeling, but it was also a humbling feeling in a way that we hit something which was really about giving a recipe for organizational happiness. We were not just talking about it, we were actually giving a recipe. We were telling organizations, how can you really work with happiness, organizational happiness, well-being for employees, so it results in a business case and it's a really strategic area for your organization. So the last, I think from Mohit and I, the last 2 years, we have, this has taken up a lot of our professional life, organizational happiness. And it's really, I think what we do good, Mohit and I together, is that we get from talking about it to actually doing something about it. We get from strategy to action, we get to walking the talk. That's the name of the course. So that's what we try to offer everyone we meet. And in that sense, I think Mohit and I are a dream team when we work with people and organizations. This is just not just, but this is something we're working at the moment for Sykes, a large organization. For this part of the organization, there are 5,000 employees. But they are developing, it's a good example of an organization that are developing a mission for organizational happiness, because they believe in it as a motor for success, both for well-being for the individual, for the employees, but also as a motor for success. And a little later, I'll share a little bit about what kind of business case we are working on for different organizations, and how that is looking for different types of organization. But we wanted to share this because we think it's so nice that I think it's a very, both a heartfelt, meaningful, but also a very strong mission in terms of a strategic area that you want to do something about in your organization. So we wanted to share that as an example of an organization that is really ambitious around this.
Thanks, Lars. Now, I see a number of you have taken courses or workshops with us. And so I just wanted to start off before we get into the topics to say, what are some of the benefits of enrolling in the workshop on organizational happiness? One is, as Lars has mentioned, the content we offer is cutting edge. It's very practical. Some of the research we've had now for about 10 years, but actually very few companies are being able to work with it and put it into practice. So that's one of the benefits. You're getting a sense of the kind of international network that the University for Peace convenes. And so the exchanges amongst participants and the networking is a powerful aspect of why you might want to take the workshop with us. We'll talk more about this, but one of the deliverables of the 5-week process is a roadmap to implement organizational happiness for your team or your organization. And one of the challenges that most organizations we've worked with face is they're not actually measuring the organizational happiness level. And this is where we look into the science of what does it mean for employees to be happy. Lars, through his network in Denmark, has created a tool called the Motivational Landscape that you'd have access to through this course. And of course, upon completion and submitting your final roadmap, you would be awarded a certificate from the United Nations established University for Peace. And Lars and I are both available either individually. Usually people pick one of us depending on the particular focus they have or the geography to do a coaching call to help implement the plan. This is post course. So these are some of the reasons that we hope that you will not only absorb a lot during this kind of appetizer webinar, and also think about taking the much more intense and in-depth course with us. So the way the webinar has been structured is very similar to the structure of the course. We'll talk a little bit about the science of happiness, and then we'll talk about the business case for organizations to work with happiness before talking about what is the happiness sweet spot, how to measure, monitor, and act on it. And then the last component we'll talk about is the importance of actually having a roadmap. So our talking points are going to match the 5 different modules that we offer through the workshop. So is everyone ready for me to jump in and just get into the science of happiness? So I'm going to start off by asking you a question. When you hear organizational happiness, what are a few words that come to mind for you? So just chat the response in the text box. Just 1, 2, 3 words that come to mind for you when you hear organizational happiness, or even a sentence. I'll give you 30 seconds for this. Empowerment, Sharon. Brittany says motivation. Graciela, well-being of employees. Leadership. Balance. Communalism. Employee value, well-being, cohesiveness, satisfaction, peace of mind, sense of belonging, achieving goals, teamwork, stability, balance, freedom to express oneself, freedom to love your work and what you do, joy, engagement, teamwork, productivity, realization, balance, fulfillment, positivity, fun, clear mind, authentic. Wonderful to see your responses. In the past, in the course, we sometimes take these words and create a word cloud and see which words get resonated the most. Thank you everyone for responding. So you know, I just want to kind of convey the range of words we saw. It was everything from achievement, getting results, to loving what you do, to motivation. And in fact, that's exactly right. It's not one dimensional, right? And so when we get into the science of happiness first, many of you who've taken a course with UPEACE know this framework, and that's our starting point. It's developed by Martin Seligman with a team of psychologists, but on one slide, if I had to capture the 5 elements of our understanding of well-being, it's these 5 words or letters. And I'll just talk about one right now: engagement. In the course, we look at all of these. Engagement is as simple as knowing your strengths and using them. And so if you want to think about an important pillar of organizational happiness is, do you know your strengths and are you using them? Are your teammates aware of their strengths and are you using and are they using them? And what tools are you using to actually capture this? And how are you making this part of your organizational culture? So that's a little bit about the science of happiness. And really our focus is not at the individual level. I think a lot of great work is being done at individual happiness. Our focus is at the organizational level. Each of these spheres is important. The national level, Bhutan, for example, is a country that is measuring gross national happiness, and we have actually a 3-day virtual hybrid conference called Gross Global Happiness in Costa Rica and virtually in March, and that we look at really the dimension of national happiness. Also, this course is going to focus on happiness at the organizational level, and so I want to leave it over to Lars now to talk a little bit about why is it so important for organizations to focus on happiness? Are they doing it or not? And what's the business value of doing so? So Lars, over to you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I think it was Natalie just said Dubai even have a happiness minister, and which is also a good example. You mentioned Bhutan. I think India is doing something around that, advising the government. And Dubai has a happiness minister, which is actually a woman in that place. Yeah. So there's a lot going on, and I think I wanted to say that now because we are in a space where there is a lot going on. And I think also the attention that we get on a webinar like this or other things that we're doing, there's a lot going on. And when we look at it with a focus on organizations, this is where there's not so much being done. It's been very much on an individual level, very much on a national society level, but on the organization level, it has been really difficult to implement, you could say. It's been easy to talk about, but very difficult to implement or integrate into your organization. I wanted also to touch, just before that, when you mentioned engagement, Mohit, on the PERMA model, I wanted to, just to give just an example there, I wanted to say, maybe we're not going to do this exercise, but I want to ask that question. What's your superpower? And it's an interest. Sorry?
I'm going to hold up my mug. We think it's such an important question that I don't know if you can see, it's going away into the shadows, but it says here, what's your superpower?
Yeah. And I think that relates, or that taps into the engagement, using your strengths. But very often that question, very often we are not familiar, or we're not used to having that question. What's your superpower? But you need to know what your superpower is to be able to put it into play for the mission of the organization. That's how we work. So if you don't know it, you need to find out, and that's what we're helping with also. But you also need to know the superpowers of your team, right? So that's some of the things. I'll maybe get back to that, but that's something we will be working on in the course around purpose, or around strengths-based leadership, sorry. Okay, on the business case, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to show you a business case, but I wanted to say an example we are working with at the moment is when we are working on just a direct business case on what if you reduced retention, or if you reduced attrition rates, if you're able to retain your top talent better. That's some of the business cases that we're doing right now in a bigger organization. And it comes out to $1 million in 1 year. So it's like, I just want to give that example. When you really work with that business case, it's really a no-brainer about, it's not just talking about happiness, it's talking directly to the boardroom, to the top management, to your CFO about what's the business case around organization happiness. I think it's so important because it's a handle where we really get from putting it into the annual report, talking about how important well-being and employee happiness is, to really getting into the business case and what is it that we're delivering on the bottom line, and why is this making sense. Can I have the next one, Mohan? So just wanted to ask you, just put it in the chat box. Is your company investing in employee happiness? Maybe you call it something else. Maybe you call it employee well-being or well-being programs, but this is something you're talking about. Is leadership committed to it, or is leadership not committed to organization happiness? From a scale from 1 to 5, just I think there's quite a few people in the room now, but maybe just put up your hands, a 1 or a 5 or in between. Let's just have a vote. There's a 4. I see a vote from Joseph there.
Vignesh, I see a 3.
Yeah, nice.
Maripili, a 4. Okay.
And there's a lot going on in the chat box. I can see that as well.
So quite a range coming in.
Yeah.
We actually have a couple of 5s, which is great to see. I think Prakash as one who had a 5. So it's nice to have some best practice. And Mauricio also.
And I think this is also, I think there's even a development the last 6 months with organizations that there is a window now for organizational happiness. I think it shows with the book that we published and why it got so popular in many geographies, but it's also something we're talking a lot about, but it's really difficult to say, what's the first thing we need to do? How can we integrate and implement it into our organization? So it's not just it's not a football table. It's not about giving high fives every time. It's a lot more than that. It's one of your most strategic projects probably, and something that is really paying off in terms of delivering on your promises and your strategy. So thank you for that. It's really interesting input for that. I like that a lot. Thank you. Here's a few of the examples. I'm not going to dig into that, but I would say that maybe 5 years ago, there was a lot of attention of proving the business cases for organizational happiness. We are not there anymore. We know there is a business case. The research is done. The cases is there. We just need to implement and work with it. So Mohit and I have been doing a lot of research on this, both from an academic, also practical point of view. And so all the cases are there. We're sitting on so much information and so much proven evidence of why it makes sense to do something like this. So, and I just want, I mean, so this is not, I'm not going to ask you this in the chat box, but just think about that. What would that mean for your organization? Very often, some of the organizations we are talking to, or the part of the organization, very often HR or consultants or a leader. And to bring that project organizational happiness into the organization is also really about speaking the language of the organization. What would it mean if you could deliver $1 million on the bottom line, or saving that? Or what would it mean to organization if you had happier, healthier employees? It's really about more productivity, customer satisfaction, and of course that leads to more profit and probably more success with your integrating your strategies. So that's what I'm going to say about the business case. It's not an easy thing, but it's done when you have the right data from that specific organization. It's really doable to make a business case on your organization happiness program.
So Lars, just to add to that, I mean, the fact that it's not easy means that a lot of people don't measure it. And when you don't measure organizational happiness and the potential that you can save from the data we saw, then it's hard to justifiably invest in it, right? Because you don't know what it represents to the company. So through the course, we help each participant for their own organization or team to come up with a conservative business case that allows them, either you might be the owner of your company, or you might be a manager, or you might just be a team member that influences management, to invest in this critical aspect of any organization.
Yeah. So just a little bit on the happiness sweet spot, which is really the fundament for the book, and also for how we're going to implement organizational happiness program. And it's like the 3 pillars of organizational happiness. As you can see here, the book is now in English and Spanish and in Arabic. So it gives I think with the last times we counted, there was like 2 billion people, two with 9 zeros after it, right? That are able to read this book. So the message, and it's almost like, I would say, sometimes we talk also about organizational happiness as a movement. And you can see the interest here. It's also, there's a lot going on, and connecting people that would like to work with this is also a part of our mission, Mohit and I mission. So the happiness sweet spot looks like this. And we talked about strengths. Mohit mentioned it. So it's really about translating what we saw as the PERMA model, as the science of happiness, into something that works in an organization. And these are the 3 pillars of organizational happiness. And on each of these 3 pillars, there are actions below that an organization or leaders can do in an organization. It's not a one size fits all. You cannot have that, but it's something that makes it easy for organizations to work with. We looked at strengths, which is at the lower right corner there. We just mentioned that as a part of engagement, or what's your superpower? We said, what's inside when you take off your shirt, and what do you have tattooed on your chest there? What is it that you're really good at, and how do you put that into play for the purpose of your organization? Sometimes we talk about a winning strategy is talking about what you're really good at and how you can do more of that. A losing strategy is talking about what is it that you're not so good at that you need to be a little better at. Also, on the purpose side, it's really about having a heartfelt purpose for your organization, something that is more than profit. How do you serve society? How do you give back? What makes you proud of being a part of that organization? Why? What's the story you tell to the market and to all your stakeholders around? That's the exercise we're doing there. On the compassion side, the lower left corner, this is really about leadership. I don't think you can have leadership without compassion. Compassion is not empathy. It's more than empathy. Compassion is an active thing. It's an interest in other people's difficulties and a burning desire to do something about it, which is really leadership in our view. So that's what we're doing here is how do you cultivate a culture of compassion? So as I said, it's not a one size fits all, but we work in each of these 3 pillars, and you can work with that, or we work with organizations around these. And it's really about releasing the potential that you already have in your organization. How can you work with these 3 things to release potential that is already in your organization? And some of the things you put into the chat box relates to that, like engagement, motivation. There's a lot of energy words into the chat box when we ask for that. How do you release that energy in your organization? And this is a recipe for doing that as a leader and as a consultant or as HR professional in your organization.
Thank you. So I also want to mention this is a good point. If you have questions that are coming up, please feel free to chat them in. We have about 15 minutes left and a couple of topics left to cover, but we'll try to hit on the questions. But there was a question earlier about, so what's your working definition of organizational happiness? And so our starting point was the 5 pillars of well-being, which was PERMA. And then when we thought about PERMA in the context of organization, it's about organizations that have developed a very strong purpose, that have a culture of strengths-based leadership and leadership that's compassionate. That and Lars, love your definition. It's not only the empathy and a burning desire to act. So it's organizations that have created that culture. And some of you might say, well, what about achievement? What about results? And let's save that for the end, but it's a great question. You might have your guess about what about results. I would like to say that in that brainstorm, when you put words that you associate with organizational leadership, I didn't see a word that I looked at and felt doesn't get captured in this model. It fits somewhere in these 3 boxes. So you're all on the right track in terms of understanding what it is. It's just that very few organizations are doing this systematically and measuring the business case.
And maybe I can, and I'm have to be aware of timing here because I'm passionate about this, this subject. So, but I see that Mauricio is also asking, would compassion be interpreted as empathy? And I think we have to be very careful with the empathy, or we have to, empathy is in essence a passive thing. It's empathy is important for leaders to have that leadership trait, but it's a passive thing. It's a thing, I feel you, I can see what's going on, but it's not that I'm doing something about it. So I think it's more than empathy. It's compassion in action, you could say. This is leadership. And this we will spend a lot more time on, I hope, at some stage with some of you. It's a very interesting topic. Yeah, how to measure money. And I think I'm just going to introduce to you, Mohit mentioned in the beginning, the tool that we have, Motivation Landscape. It's really about doing a pulse survey on your organization on a regular basis. So you have real-time data on how is your organization doing right now. If you do that only once a year or every 6 months, you will be acting on old data all the time. We can talk a lot about this, but I think there is a shift right now in not doing so much the annual employee satisfaction survey, but doing smaller, more simple pulse surveys. And this is a very good, I think it's a very good example. It's linked to the framework, the happiness sweet spot, and it's only 10 questions that you can, it takes about 90 seconds for an employee to answer, to give feedback on it. So it's something where you take a pulse, the temperature on your organization on a regular basis to see if you're on track with your organization happiness program and your business case. You can, if you're interested, I mean, in the course, we will of course share the platform, and you can, you will have access to set up your own team, or you can also have a look at the website if you're interested, if you're not participating in the course. But these are the 10 questions, and this is an example of how one organization is scoring that just the other day that we put in there.
Great. So, I think what I want to emphasize is a lot of these tools, we want to make sure that through this webinar, you can access them, you can go to the website, the questions, are here on the screen. We'll follow up with the slides. Of course, the challenge, of course, is going from an intellectual understanding of why these things are important and how one might do it, to really putting in something that one's committed to working within one's organization. And that's the last step of our process, both in terms of this webinar. I want to talk about the importance of that. And then in the course, we make sure that everybody leaves with an action plan on how they might actually apply this in the environment that makes sense to them. And just a quick note there was some of the research on organizational happiness got published by Harvard Business Review in 2012. It was the cover was about organizational happiness, leads to profits. That was now 9 years ago. It was January of 2012. And, to somebody's point, I think, Rolly, you wrote here that we are only finding that a very small minority of organizations are actually doing it. So a lot of people and organizations and leaders know of its importance, but the missing step is putting it all together in an action plan that the organization is committed to. And so this is just a high-level template of what we urge every participant to emerge with, which is quarter by quarter, what are the things that you are going to do in order to reach that vision. With Sykes, Lars shared with you the vision of organizational happiness. Who's the team working on it? What are you measuring? And what are the key performance indicators in order to track progress? So this is one template that we offer in order to put all of this in motion. So, this is a little bit of an overview of what we think are the really important steps to organizational happiness is first understanding the science of happiness. And we'll share with you at the end of this webinar the first chapter of the book that kind of goes into all the 5 elements of PERMA, gives you a good overview. And from understanding the science, how can you then apply it to organizations? And then thinking about how are you going to measure and monitor it, and how you're actually going to make sure that you have the, I would call it the political internal will to move forward with an action plan. So this is the, we had our inaugural course during the pandemic. These are we had, I think a couple of you are on today, so wonderful to see you. We had a very diverse group of participants. We are looking forward. I think we have 12 signed up for the course starting in 3 weeks, and we still have 6 spots available. Lars, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, a couple of things, 2 things, or maybe there were 3 things at the end, but so no, when you mentioned what was going on also, and coming from 2012 with the cover issue of Harvard Business Review, I also wanted to say that just recently, last month in December, even Toyota, and you know when Toyota is doing something, you know there's something happening in the world. Even Toyota put into their mission statement, delivering happiness for all, or something like that, producing happiness for all. So they, and of course, when Toyota does that, it's because they can see some benefits in it, but also that it makes sense in a society level. So I just want to push that message also. It's huge, and there's a lot going on. And then there was a question also about measuring. I think it was Natalia asked about, should we measure every quarter? I would say every month, depending on the size of your organization, but it's an easy measure. So if you have your monthly happiness sweet spot score, that would be the optimal, I think, because this gives you manager guidance for what kind of conversation is it that I need to have with my team. It's a measurement, but it's also for me as a manager, what's the most important conversation I can have the next time we have a team meeting? And this is the kind of measurement that you can, it's like having a KPI. It's like you have your financial KPIs, you have your customer satisfaction for sure every month, and you should have your employee or your organizational happiness KPI every month. I think it's the 3 things that makes your business, right?
Yeah, and this is where I'm so glad people asked, you know, what is happiness? Because it is not just about positive emotions. It's not about, you know, Lars mentioned a lot of organizations that you read about in the Silicon Valley typically have, you know, these fun ping pong tables or foosball tables, and that's fun. And it's great to be smiling and have high energy. That is a very small part of the social sciences understanding of happiness. It's, our focus is a lot more on, do you have leaders who genuinely care about you? That's one of the 10 questions, right? Do you feel that your work makes a difference in others' lives? Do you feel like you're able to use your strengths at work? Those are the kinds of questions that make up the 10 questions. It's not about, are you having fun at work? I don't think that's one of the questions. Not that that's not important, but there are other aspects of happiness that are much more important. In fact, psychologists, positive psychologists don't love the word happiness because we do think of the smiley face. And in fact, a lot of these things, when you're in a state of flow, when you're doing work that you love, you're actually not smiling. You're not conscious about time. And you look at your watch, 2 hours have gone by because you were doing work that really played to your strengths, that makes sense to the purpose of the organization. So thank you for clarifying that in your questions. And I think that's a big misunderstanding in this field, that positive emotions equals happiness, and that's just a very small aspect of it. So, what I want to do is just, Lars and I will stay on. We've got about 3 more minutes officially of your time. And so I wanted to just share with you kind of a follow-up. You'll be receiving an email from Paula. Paula, you might want to just, there's so many people on the screen. If you put up your hand and just wave so people
Hi,
and say hi. Yeah.
everyone. That's me.
So, so you'll be hearing from Paula, following up on this. Also, please feel free. We would invite you to connect with Lars and me on LinkedIn. Email us if there is certainly something that you want that is quite specific to something that got mentioned or said. Lars and I feel in many ways that this is such an important area. Again, people spend the majority of their waking hours at work, and yet even with the pandemic, with people working from home, where they have a lot more autonomy and a lot more flexibility, Gallup's recent polls showed that it was a funny headline that never before have so many people been so engaged at work. And that number was still at 40%. Less than 50% of people responding feel engaged at work. So the short of it is there's so much potential for us to flourish in this space where we spend most of our waking hours. So please feel free to connect with us around the larger kind of journey that we're on. Because we're scratching the surface of the potential. Lars, back to you before I just share a couple of last slides.
Yeah, and I wanted to share on the connection side. Of course, there is we talked a lot about the course going on in 2 or 3 weeks time, kicking off there. But I think there is also now you see more than 50 people logging into something like this, and what you see is like-minded people probably. So it's also, I think, about, I'd be happy, reach out to Mohit and I on LinkedIn, wherever. We are sitting on so much knowledge, so many cases. So just reach out, but I think also reach out to the other people that you see on the screen here. It's I think that I can see there's a lot going on in the chat box also, and I think we should build on that relationship and or creating the connections and creating the movement if we can in different ways.
Thanks, Lars. One of the things that certainly happens in the course is our approach is very much one where we understand that anyone who's on this 5-week longer journey is looking not only to learn, to have a plan, but also to have peers who are working on the same projects, but in different companies. Paula, when exactly does the course start? What's the launch date?
It's the 27th of January.
27th. Okay, so in exactly 2 weeks. And so just, we've run this once, and we'll share these slides with you. But Adriana from Mexico, I think she says it well, learn to implement a realistic and strategic methodology to create a culture of wellness in your company. Receive support from experts open to listening and guiding you to the success of the culture of happiness. Our process is very much in the workshop a consultative process versus us kind of lecturing for 1.5 hours. We never do that. Dexter from Guyana said this course embodies what is needed in every organization, whether nonprofit, governmental, or company. You'll never regret doing this course and the skills you learn from it. So we have a cohort now of participants. I'm not sharing all the testimonials with you here. I did want to leave just a few minutes for Q&A. We'll stay on for up to 10 minutes at the end. But yeah, for those of you who had asked about achievement, I think this one slide summarizes it all. Happiness is good for individuals, it's good for organizations, and it's good for society. Happy employees means happy customers means a successful company. So it's not putting the focus on financial success, it's putting the focus on happy employees. But there is, of course, a trickle down effect on customers, on results, and at the end, more meaningful lives for all. So that's our theory of change. Let's not focus on the results, let's focus on the process and let the results take care of themselves, and let's measure that, because otherwise we have no proof that it's working. So thank you, everyone. If you need to run, jump off, we understand. We'll be in touch with you over email, and we're going to stay on for another 10 minutes if there's questions, discussion, any questions we didn't get to in the chat. So Thanks everyone. If you need to leave, wonderful to see some familiar faces. Sorry I wasn't able to connect individually with everyone, but so thanks. So now let's bring it on. Questions, comments, thoughts. Feel free to chat them in, or you can unmute yourself and speak. Sharon, how do we get over the challenge where the C-suite believe that you should be happy just to have a job, especially this COVID-19 environment? Fantastic question. You know what I do with questions? If they're easy, lowball questions, I answer them. Otherwise, I'm like, Lars is the, so Lars, do you want to take a first hard questions? Go to Lars. He's bigger, taller. He's written the book. I take the easy ones. No, but go for it, Lars. If you have some time.
No, I think Sharon, that's a question we get asked a lot, and I think it's also the reason why some of the things that we're doing, that we are in kind of in high demand, because it's not many happiness evangelists or people who believe in happiness as a motive for success. It's not many of those people who can step into the boardroom or talk to the C-suite or to the executive management and say, this is what we're going to do. This is the business case. And however you look at it, it makes sense. Happier, healthier employees is one way of looking at it. The business case is another way of looking at it. But very often so sometimes we dress up and put up a suit and a tie and step into that boardroom and explain why you need to do that as an organization. And we are able to do that with the backgrounds that we have. And sometimes it can be, if we are more into, I have seen this happen when we start talking about mindfulness, meditation, yoga, relaxing, stress. I see the boardroom losing attention, and that doesn't mean that it's not important, but it just means that it doesn't fit anywhere into the strategies that you're talking about. So you need to use another language, and you probably also need to put it into a bigger content to make it work in that way. So a great question, because we have that challenge all the time.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah. Other questions or even a comment, please feel free to come off mute and share something that you've personally experienced during this time. Paula, I'm going to go ahead and share a quick story just from this question. Sharon's question prompted this. We're so happy to have Paula on our team. She was on a different team when COVID started and in a different organization. And their first reaction was, let's put everything on hold. And employees come last. Let's protect the finances of the organization and let's furlough employees until they've got nowhere to go. It's COVID, nobody's hiring. And I think that's a big mistake. There's only that long a great employee will stay in conditions that they can't flourish. And we were so grateful to have Paula be able to join our team at a time where she didn't feel like her current employer at that time was making her happy in any way. So I do think people are our greatest kind of, that's what the word organization is. It's organic, it's about people. And if you treat that as your last resource, or Sharon, to your point, if you think they should just be grateful to have a job, that might be true for a short period before the top talent will leave. Other questions, maybe that even got asked earlier. I'm scanning through the chat, but please feel free to re-ask a question if you asked it and it didn't get answered.
I think there was one we hit, but I think it was Maripili.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was mentioning the KPIs, and I mentioned KPI, key performance indicators, because that's also how you speak in your executive management group or in your boardroom. So sometimes you need to use these words to get into integrating happiness to your organizations. And then my appeal is that shouldn't it be a KBI, behavioral? And I like that comment, because that's what it is, right? It is coming from talking about something to changing an actual behavior. Do you want to comment, Marpil? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Lars. Hi, Mohit. Good to see you again.
Likewise.
I think it's quite important that we move from that just performance. We're not just numbers. We're talking about human beings. And especially in these times, it is more important to know the behavior, the emotions, values, things that we have in the people than just a number they're accomplishing. So companies should focus more on how they're behaving, contributing to the company than just that number. And that's part of organizational happiness. I mean, happiness is achieving all those elements in the company, not just one number that goes into a statistic. That was my comment for.
That's great. Yeah. So I see book recommendations, already knowledge exchange. I think I'm going to do like an auction, going once, going twice, in terms of last thoughts, comments, questions before we log off. I know that we're all in different time zones. For some of you, it's already late evening. Lars, I think for you, it's dark outside, but for Denmark in winter, it probably gets dark at 4:30, but certainly by 8 p.m.
Right.
it's dark. So
that's right.
Tribal leadership. Thank you, Luis, for recommending that. Okay, so last comments, questions, thoughts, going once, going twice. All right, so thank you very, very much. I think the most precious thing that we have is our time, is our focus, is our attention. And I've really appreciated seeing so many of you interested in such an important topic and engaging. We'll be in touch over email first, LinkedIn, if you choose to look for us there. And both Lars and I, and certainly Paula, are responsive to inquiries. We love this work. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.